Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Vulcan Report with yours truly, the Algo Capitalist. Jumping right into things today, looking at the Bitcoin futures, looks like the post-wave analysis was correct yet again, and you can see here where the market has broken out. On the weekly, the market is still trying to find itself. What it needs to do is close above the 7,957 mark tomorrow in order to put in a short-term bottom on the weekly chart. However, looking at the daily chart, the short-term bottom has already been now in place because of the breakout, which we called here. All right, so the market has broken out, got above the first line of resistance, and now it's gunning for the secondary resistance of 91.76. All right, we'll see how high this thing can go, but right now it is looking good. It is looking quite bullish. Taking a look at the daily chart of the Dow, it's quite a different story. As you know, the Dow has been moving sideways and has not broken out to the up or downside because it has a 1,000-point trading range. So that there's a lot of wiggle room within a 1,000-point range. So here you go. The market is still, all right, still trading in the range, still trading below the trend line resistance. The overhead resistance is at 24,550. And the market needs to close tomorrow above 24,285 on the daily chart to keep this upward momentum going. Even though it looks like the market's doing a lot, but it's not. As you can see, it's still in a downward bear market, and it's still trading below the Kumo cloud. And that's just on the daily chart. If you look here on the weekly chart, the weekly chart shows that the Dow needs to close tomorrow above 24,293, and it is struggling at the trend line resistance of 24,452. So even though it's looking like the market is trying to rise, technically speaking, all we're doing is trading within this bar here from the week of March the 19th of 2018. Market has not broken out from that. All right, hasn't broken out, top or bottom side. So you've had this is the third week of consolidation. If we don't move outside of this bar, all right, the market is staying and respecting this bar. It's also respecting this bar from the week of February the 5th. All right, this is still a pointer. This is still acting as a pointer, folks. So the market is nowhere out of the woods yet. I still believe that the rally is going to be sold. All right, the top was put in, the high was put in back here the week of January the 29th of 2018 when the Dow hit 26,684. All right, 2,000 points later, here you go. Okay, so this is where you are. You've lost 2,000 points, and the market is struggling to regain some of that momentum. But technically speaking, you're just in a sideways market. All right. You're just lifting off from the bottom end of the range, just like you sold off from the top end of the range here. All right. So for those of you that are struggling to understand and comprehend what I'm saying, I'll just draw you a little picture. All right. This is the top of the range here, and this is the bottom of the range here. All the market is doing is oscillating between those 2 points. All right. Here and here. Okay. That's it. Nothing else is happening. It is trading within a range. So from day to day, it'll look like, oh, the Dow was up 400 points, or it was up 1%. They like to do 1%, 2%, make it sound better. But it's doing nothing but just going up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's been doing this for a while, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the 9th week in a row. All right. 2 months, folks, of sideways trading within a 1,000 point trading range. That is incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So what are you going to do? It's nothing you can do. This is just the nature of the beast at this point. Now let's take a look at the NASDAQ 100. All right, on the weekly, NASDAQ 100 needs to close above 66.51 and a quarter, and right now it's above it by about 2 points. Okay, but it's going to need to maintain that and close above it tomorrow if it's going to relock in the lost momentum. Failure to do so would make this the fourth week in a row that the market has lost and traded under the momentum. On the daily chart, flipping it over here for a bit so you can see what that looks like. All right, kind of looks like the Dow a little bit, right? Remember the Dow chart. Really having a problem with overhead resistance of 66.94 and 3/4. Really having problems with that, and it is in the Kumo cloud, okay? So the market's going to need to break out of that, and we're at 66.12 on the daily as far as momentum. If it can close above that on the daily tomorrow, it can have hopes of carrying over momentum for next week and possibly push outside of the Kumo cloud and catch the rampage right here. So it's still a maybe. It's a question mark here on what the NASDAQ will be able to accomplish. All right, looking at crude oil now, sticking with the daily chart. You can see this one is moving up nicely, just hit a new high of 67.45 on its way to 70. A close tomorrow above 65.85 should keep the momentum moving forward into next week. Looking at the XLE ETF that follows and tracks the crude oil, it's in the Kumo cloud right now, but has good momentum behind it. A close above $69.53 will also keep the momentum alive here. We'll have trouble though getting above 71, 72 bucks. It's having a problem with that. 71 right now is proven to be a problem. So we'll see if it can push beyond that going into next week. Taking a look at natural gas, which has been in the news. As you can see here, it's still flat. And this is the daily chart, not the weekly. If I pulled up the weekly chart, you would see pretty much the same thing. It's flatline. It's just hugging the momentum line completely. All right, on the weekly, needs to close above 268 tomorrow in order to turn on the spigot for some buying opportunities for next week. Failure to do so would just keep this thing flat, and it will keep it under pressure, meaning that any type of a rally would be sold instantly. All right, so this bear market is just really getting started. It's been quiet. Market can't rally, and the market really isn't selling off either. It's just flat. Like there's no interest in the natural gas whatsoever. Let's see. Let's take a look here at the U.S. dollar, which has also been in the news. Of course, the Trump White House is going to defend the dollar and keep it within the 89 to 91. That's really where they want to keep it at. All right. If it gets to 88, it becomes a problem. So I don't see the dollar going to 88 anytime soon. I think they're going to keep it above that 89 watermark, and they're going to put the brakes on it at around 91. So it's just going to oscillate between that 2-point radius. I don't see it breaking out. This is what the Trump White House needs. Taking a look at gold. I really thought that there would be some follow through yesterday with the gold breakout, but all it's doing is putting in a sword and making a another pointer. So eventually the market wants to break out, but I think we just had sort of a false start. It did show us that it wants to get back up toward the higher end of the range, the trading range, but it's just nothing's been there. There's been no conviction on either side. Rallies have been sold, sell-offs have been bought, but to no avail. The market has not had what it needs to really take off. All right, it's in a bullish position or complexion per se, but not really because the long-term trend line is really not out of the Kumo cloud yet. And this is on the weekly chart. It's going to need to come out of there. So this one is still a wild card. I think that a lot of the confusion in this market is because of all the information that's been flowing around. There's a lot of economic activity going on, but it's being overshadowed by the mainstream media controlling the narrative. All right. That's why there's so much confusion in the gold and the silver. Let's pull up the silver now. All right. So on the weekly chart here, as you can see, silver also, it pulled back. All right. It has not been able to get it together. It's in total sideways mode. Looking at the daily chart here on the silver. All right. Sold off. Had a nice little rally yesterday and gave it all back and then took out the lows. All right. And has now broke support. And it's lost momentum. It's going to need to gain it back. It really is. It needs a strong close above $16.53 tomorrow if it's going to try to make another run at the upside resistance around the $17 mark. All right, so this is where we are right now. There's so much confusion. The mainstream media is controlling the narrative. They're telling you that you should be concerned about women being paid less than men in the workplace. They're telling you that's the narrative. They're telling you you need to be concerned with Black Lives Matter. All right. And on the back of that, police brutality, shooting unarmed people, and lone gunmen. All right. The media is telling you what you should be concerned with instead of you exercising critical thinking for yourself and looking at the real issues. The real issues is what's happening with the economy and what's happening with this taking over of other countries and their natural resources. There's a big push and a big fight for power. There's also infighting going on. The question people need to ask themselves is not so much of is there a shadow government? Is there a global cabal? That's not really the question or the issue. The issue is what really is the shadow government? It's a very complex animal. Technically speaking, we no longer really have a government in the traditional sense. We really don't. We really don't have a democracy. We don't even have a constitutional republic anymore. You can't tell where the government begins and Fortune 500 companies end. All right? The government has all but delegated its authority and its governing role to private corporations because private corporations can be protected by the government mechanism. It's easier for a private corporation to do killing and get away with it than it would be for the government to do killing and get away with it. So they contract, with other companies, all right, like Blackwater and things like that, these private mercenary groups. Who are they? Think about it. A Fortune 500 company that has its own military. Sound familiar? How is it that the U.S. Constitution can be so easily, how can I say this, so easily disregarded, and no one is brought to justice with these types of crimes against the Constitution, crimes against the Republic, crimes against the real human rights. We have prop organizations that have been bankrolled by special interest groups like George Soros. He's funded and propped up organizations like the Black Lives Matters and this whole gun confiscation situation. What people should really ask themselves is, how is it possible that it is so easy to skirt around the U.S. Constitution? How is it that we don't have a government anymore? And because we don't have a government, really don't have a constitution. We have elite superpowers fighting and going against one another. Let me give you an example. We're supposed to have a Congress. We're supposed to have a judicial system. We're supposed to have these different department heads and extensions of the government to run the federal government. So you have all these different departments. But these departments form a complicated bureaucracy. And it doesn't stop there, because you've now dissolved a lot of these department agencies into special interest groups under the umbrella of Fortune 500 companies. For instance, George Soros is a billionaire. He operates under the umbrella as a philanthropist, but he's not. He's a special interest group that happens to be a corporation. He's able to undermine the U.S. federal government with billions of dollars that he has at his disposal to back what we would call, if it was happening in a foreign country, we would call this radicalization. We would call this terrorist organizations. All right? We do think of it. Look at it this way. When the US government or other governments go and occupy a foreign country, right, under the guise of humanitarianism, and then certain individuals or peoples in said foreign country rise up and resist the occupation, you don't call them freedom fighters, you call them terrorists, right? So we're able to usurp sovereign entities, sovereign countries. We're also able to usurp the Constitution. They know it would be a lot of backlash and possible civil war in the United States if they were just to come out and ban all firearms, all guns, just ban them, saying the U.S. citizens can't have them anymore. It would be riots in the street, right? And they know that. So what do? They say we have to, since we can't do away with that constitutional amendment, let's just undermine the U.S. Constitution. Since we can't do away with the U.S. Constitution, let's just undermine it. Let's find a legal way to undermine it. What does the federal government do? The federal government goes to its departments and its department heads and says, we need to do something about this. Who are the government's department heads? The U.S. government's department heads are now corporations. So they go to the corporations. Who is their number one corporation? They're the government's number one Fortune 500 company. I'm using that term loosely just for example purposes. The Federal Reserve is the U.S. federal government's number one private held corporation. All right, the U.S. government uses publicly traded corporations and privately held corporations to do its bidding. So since the White House and the Senate and the Congress couldn't just get together and say, let's ban guns and do away with the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, they say what we can do is just undermine it. But it's not good enough just to undermine it. They have to get the American people to agree with them undermining it. Because everything is about politics. They have to get public approval. How do you get public approval for something that the public has already told you they do not approve of? You have to make them want to approve it. So how do they do this? They stage all types of um, public reaction. So you'll have these active shooter drills and things of that nature to disgust the American people and to put fear into your heart that, hey, this can be you next. You could be the victim of a lone gunman incident. And it doesn't stop there. They have to use other types of marketing techniques, psychology techniques. One of those techniques is the emotional technique. So you use children, you use young kids, you use, college students, high school students. You have them speak out against gun violence and say we need to basically ban guns. And it starts off with them saying we need to ban assault rifles. All right, they want to start there. And then what do? Eventually, they take away the guns. Now, they know that that's not going to work the way they need it to work, but at least it's building that foundation. And it's now implementing a new narrative for people to deal with based on the talking points that they've selected for the topic. All right. So now when you overhear people talking in the bar about said subject, they're only using the talking points that they've been fed over and over and over again. Right? Totally skirting the issue. The real issue is that the federal government is going to usurp and undermine the U.S. Constitution, and they're using special interest groups headed by corporations to do their bidding. So, how does this work? How are they going to do it? This is how they do it. You see, back during the 2008 financial crisis, the U.S. government had to bail out many banking institutions and Fortune 500 companies. They gave them a lot of money. The Federal Reserve also shelled out a lot of money. So they now basically own these banks. All right. So what happens? They say, okay, banks, we got it. We figured it out. This is what we need you to do. We need you to cut off the funding sources to the gun manufacturers. If you can do that, then we don't have to worry about the proliferation of firearms to U.S. citizens, because what will happen is these gun manufacturers and um, gun shops will basically go out of business because they won't be able to get funding and financing. All right, banks won't open a bank account for them. So you got a lot of these gun shops, a lot of them are mom and pop. They can't get the funding they need, so they have to close their doors. Okay, so that's strike one. What else did the federal government do? The federal government said, okay, it's not good enough, that we just take away the ability for the U.S. citizen to get a gun. Let's buy up all the ammunition so that they won't be able to find the ammunition that they need for the guns. So what have you done now? You've basically banned guns and you've disarmed the American public because you've made it impossible for them to get a gun, and then you've made it impossible for those that already have guns to get ammunition for those guns. So what have you done now? You've solved the problem. All right? And then it doesn't stop there. Now you're making it tougher to even receive a firearm. They have waiting periods and applications and approval processes. All right? So they want to stiffen up the laws and make it impossible for you to get certain things. So they're basically saying You have a constitutional right, but we're going to make it impossible for you to exercise that constitutional right. And they get the public to agree. Again, they set up another narrative, another straw man to knock down. They say, you don't want mental illness people able to get a gun, do you? Of course, the logical answer is going to be no. You don't want a mentally ill person to have a firearm. But see, that is the straw man. That's the Trojan horse. Because you have to now define what is mental illness, define what that means. Oh, well, it's broad now. See, because this is how our government works. Everything about business and government in our country is dishonest. Everything is done under legalese. You have to define words and meanings. Look at it this way: every form of advertising is dishonest. Every corporation is dishonest in their advertising. Everything has fine print. You ever listen to a lot of the car commercials? At the end of the commercial, there's a guy that is talking 100 words a second. You ever thought about that? You ever focused on that? The reason being is because the government put these rules in place that said that they have to give certain disclosures, but it never said how it had to do those disclosures. So as long as you speed talk it real quick, so it doesn't matter if you can understand it or not, the fact that they said it is all they need to do to meet the requirement. So again, you put out rules and regulations, you regulate something out of existence. That's what you're doing. So you make it hard. And then not only that, now you got the individual states' rights to deal with. Some states won't allow citizens to have firearms. They've made it illegal to have firearms, or darn near impossible to get firearms, like Massachusetts and California. All right. So very few states have the stand your ground laws and things like that. They make it impossible. They say, okay, if you have a firearm, well, there are different ways for you to be able to carry and transport this firearm. You have to have, concealed carry permits and all this other stuff. And if you do carry a firearm, you can't have it loaded. You got to have the clip in the trunk, and you can have the firearm in your holster on your, on your waist, but you can't have a bullet in the chamber. All types of stuff, all types of weird stuff, right? All done to make it uncomfortable for the average person to even acquire a firearm legally and to be able to exercise the right to keep and bear arms. So this has become a very muddy path as far as the Second Amendment to the Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms. So they've made it a narrative that they want you to focus on so that you don't get down to the brass tacks of the real issue, which is you have a U.S. constitutional right to keep and bear arms, period. No, and that is without restriction. All right. In order to be totally free, to be an organic constitutional republic, it needs to be to the letter of the law, which is you have the right to keep and bear arms, period. Doesn't matter what kind of arms they are, it's period. You should be able to conceal carry it, open carry it, doesn't matter. That is your constitutional right. What makes it weird is because the states' rights comes in and says, oh no, well in our state we're sovereign, and we want to have these different types of laws, and the federal government can't tell us what to do, and blah blah blah. The whole schematic of how our government system is supposed to work has been misconstrued and muddled up over the decades, over the years. So up is not up, down is not down. It's all messed up. And we have laws in the books that most people don't even know is a law. Is the whole thing is just coming, it's unraveling at the seams, folks. And before long, the United States of America will fully disarm its American public. It's coming, folks. It's gonna happen. And the sad thing about it is, it's going to happen because that's what the American public wants to happen. They're being psychologically and emotionally manipulated into believing that this is for the best. And they're letting the mainstream media, which is the propaganda arm of our US federal government, tell you how to act and tell you what to think and how to think instead of thinking for yourself. Any question of the mainstream narrative is frowned upon. Anyone with a competing idea or alternative viewpoint is immediately marginalized and sidelined, and they've already put in place, excuse me, trigger words. Then when people hear it, it automatically shuts down the hearer, the listener. So they'll say this, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. All right. So now you're name calling. You're not dealing with the issue. You can't attack what was said. You can't deal with what was said. So you attack the individual. All right. So the ad hominem attacks come in. And then the other thing, the rudeness. Since when did we become rude? You invite someone on to your television show, talk radio show, whatever, and then you talk over the person. You don't let them get a word out, and you steadily ad hominem attack them and using comedy and other things, and you turn their mic off and all this other stuff. That's not open debate. That's not the marketplace of ideas. You're supposed to be able to discuss, even vigorously debate, calmly, collectively. And you're supposed to be able to be adults and be polite and courteous. Let each person talk and get their point of view across, and then you get to get your point of view across. And then you get to ask questions about each point of view so that the hearer can come to draw their own conclusions. That's honest and open debate. That's coming to the marketplace of ideas. We've lost that in this country. There's no longer marketplace of ideas. It's now whatever the mainstream media says on behalf of the federal government. That's what they want you to focus on. Whatever they say is fact, and you're not allowed to question it. If you question it, you're a quack, you're a crackpot, you are a conspiracy theorist, and you're fake news. See, it's funny because the mainstream media is the real fake news outlet. They got out in front of this thing and they start calling the quote unquote alternative media the fake news, taking away their legitimacy. And then they use a lot of the quote unquote crazy people out there, because there are a lot of crazy people pretending to be alternative media. And a lot of that is disinformation set up by the mainstream media. Did you know that? Did you know that the mainstream media has a lot of websites and some of them own newspapers and magazines? Did you know that? And their main source is to put out disinformation to discredit the alternative media? Yes, that's what they do. The same way Fortune 500 companies create think tanks and fake, what's the word I'm looking for? You know how Moody's and Fitch and those guys put out, reports and ratings on companies and governments and things, and bonds and treasuries, things like that. Well, a lot of Fortune 500 companies have created their own organization to do that, and they give them awards and stuff like that. So, like, you'll see, um, just using this as an example, not saying that they are guilty of this, just use an example. So, let's say Chrysler will come out and say, "Yes, we're the winner of the XJ9 award for best vehicle, according to Altman's Driver's Quest publication." What you don't know is that publication is owned by them. All right. So it makes it seem like they are, they're legitimizing their new product. All right. And not only that, but you can also buy ratings at certain places. Not saying JD Power and Associates is guilty of this, but let's just say that you can buy whatever good press that you need. As long as you have enough money, you can buy the good press. You can hire media consultants. You can hire spokespeople whose main job it is to speak for you and to build up an image for you. There are companies that do that. All right. All I'm saying, folks, is think beyond the headlines. Learn to read between the lines. And as far as the Syria thing is, again, anything that has to do with especially Middle Eastern countries, just remember it's all about the oil. All right. At the end of the day, it's all about natural resources. Okay. Notice how you don't really hear them talking about anything going on in a country that doesn't have some natural resource that is needed heavily. All right. If Syria didn't have oil or other natural resources that we needed, you would not hear about them in the headlines. Okay? It's just how it is. It's just a fact. Okay? It's a fact. And so what do they do when they do find a country that they need to utilize their natural resources and control? What do? If they can't control the country, right? I.e., send in the central bank. If we can't establish a central bank there and control their currency and control the people and all that stuff and get them indebted through the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and all that stuff, what do? We have to now demonize the leadership in the country so that we can oust that government and install a puppet government that our Fortune 500 companies and CIA, etc., can control. All right. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. If you guys are not familiar with that, go ahead and do a search on that. Google that or do it through YouTube. You'll see um, all about that. But that's how you go in and you destabilize an area so that you can come in and control it, and you install your own government, a puppet government, puppet leadership that will do what you say. And when the day comes that puppet leadership decides that it doesn't want to listen to you anymore, you take them out and install another leader. We did that with Saddam Hussein. We did that with Gaddafi. That's what we do, folks. All right. And they say, well, if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. You don't want them controlling the resource. You want us controlling it. That's the same thing our government said over in Afghanistan. We went over to Afghanistan because of the poppy fields, the opium. It's important. It's part of a multi-billion-dollar industry called the pharmaceutical industrial complex. All right. Synthetic drugs need those poppies in order to make their drugs. I could go on and on with the problems that are going on right now. Please, folks, learn to listen and read between the lines. Listen to what's not being said so that you can understand what's really going on, and don't let them tell you what narratives to think. All the false outcry that you're seeing, because it's not real. They're trying to control the American people. All right, if they can control you and tell you what to be angry about, then you're not going to see what's really going on right in front of you. The whole Black Lives Matters is fake and it's phony. All right, it's not a real movement, folks. Those people don't give a darn about quote unquote black lives. If black lives really mattered, then they wouldn't have a Planned Parenthood in every urban center across the country. If black lives really mattered, then why are 30 to 40 million babies aborted in America? Why are 30 to 40 million black babies aborted in America every year? Huh? If black lives really matter. I don't hear any outcry about that. None. 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 If Black Lives really mattered, why don't they overhaul the U.S. legal system, U.S. justice system, so that the majority of the inmates won't be Black and Latino? So do Black Lives really matter? No. It's a false narrative. They want you to focus on that so that you don't focus on what they're really trying to do, which is bring about a wedge between the average American citizen. They want to tell you that racism is out of control and it's a racist organization out to get you, which is a lie. All right. That's what they want. They want the black and the brown and the quote unquote Caucasian white people going against each other, because as long as you're going up against each other, you're not going against this corrupt government. You understand? Right now, we are living under tyranny. Other countries across the planet are also living under tyranny. Not all countries, but especially Western ones, are living under some form of tyranny or another, and the people don't even realize it. Anyway, I've waxed philosophical for too long in this video. I've been on my soapbox. I just wanted to let you understand that the Syria thing is not what you think it is. They're just telling you what they need, what they think you need to hear, so they can control the narrative. Don't let the mainstream media control the narrative. All right? Ignore the Me Too movement. Ignore all of that. All right? Ignore it, because that too is fake. All right? They're not dealing with the truth of the matter. All right? Just so you know, the biggest rise in sexual assaults, the biggest demographic as far as sexual assaults in America from state to state, statewide, is females. All right? Bet you're not going to hear about that in the mainstream media. The number one perpetrator, the rising perpetrator in sexual assaults across the country is females, folks. Yes, you have female rapists. You will never hear about that. They'll tell you, oh, that's less than 1%, or that's rare. It doesn't really exist. That's a lie. I worked in law enforcement. I can tell you that the majority of the females that were in there, they were locked up, locked down, were there because of financial crimes or for assaults. It is a big thing that's going on right now, especially in the lesbian community. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that there are violent sexual predators that are females. All right? And that's a growing segment in the populace that they don't want you to know. But I'm here to tell you it is a fact. Saw it with my own eyes. All right? Yes. Violent sexual predators. Think about it, folks. The cat is already out of the bag. It seems like every day in the news media you see some teacher, which majority of the time is a white female, that is sexually assaulting her students, especially the male students. They're getting pregnant with these from these male students and having their babies and saying we're in love and all that. I've lost count on how many of those situations you've seen in the mainstream media in the last 20 years. It's been a rising tide, folks, and I'm here to tell you it's out of control. Most of the stuff is not even reported, but it's out of control. The new number one sexual predator is not men, it's females. Do you know that that females are number one how can I say this? Patreon of porn in America? Yes. There's a growing number of females now that are becoming addicted to pornography and everything else. I'm telling you, the tables have turned, things are off the hook. The Me Too movement is a farce. Again, it's meant to take your eyes off of what's really going on. It's the females who are now the new sexual predators. If you don't believe me, Google it, do some research, and you will be surprised. Go down to your local jails or the local prisons. All right. When a person's locked up, it's public record. Go and take a look at it. Go and if you got spare time, especially those you are retired, go to the local courthouse. Sit in on some of those open hearings. You'll be surprised who's coming through the courtroom, who's on trial for what. You'll be surprised how many females are there for violence, people. I'm talking pedophile females, women, and the majority of them are lesbian. You need to understand this, folks. I'm telling you some important things. The narrative about the Me Too movement is not about women being taken advantage of by men. All right? I just want to throw that out there at you so you can know the facts. Okay? I could go on, but I'm going to chill. I don't even know how long this video has been, but I just had to get this off my chest so you can know what's really going on. And with that being said, pulsewavetrading.com. Come learn how to trade these markets, learn how to beat the central bank at their own game. Pulsewavetrading.com. And remember, bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can, give nothing back. Peace.